Welcome back. I know you're probably thinking, didn't we do this already? So here's the thing. 1 year ago, I posted my first video, The Road to Civil War. And honestly, I wouldn't have guessed then that a year later, I'd still be covering the event. So I went back to watch it to gain some perspective on my progress making videos over the year. And I kind of forgot how rough that first one was. And I'm glad that it shows that I'm learning, but I don't want it to be a deterrent for new people coming in. So I thought I'd give it a redo, and here we are. Let's go ahead and crack the spine on this video, and I'll see you throughout for some added commentary. Hey everybody, it's Seagon, and today we're going to be heading down the road to the Civil War, covering 6 important issues that lead up to the Civil War event proper. We've got a few from the Amazing Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and a really cool one-shot that I just cannot stop geeking out over. So let's grab that first issue and crack the spine. So we start off with the Amazing Spider-Man number 529. And just from the cover, we can tell that this is an important issue, that things are changing in the Marvel Universe, and that this is the first sign. Heading into the issue, we learn that Peter has taken a job working for Tony Stark. This is important on many levels, because really it allows Peter to do both, be a hero and provide for his family. A job that would not only understand him having to run off to save civilians, but one that would actually help him facilitate that. So in Peter's eyes, Tony has given him a work-life balance that he has struggled with his entire life. And we see that Tony has taken the liberty of crafting Peter a new suit. As it's laying there on the production table, you can see that it clearly has an Iron Man Tony aesthetic. Peter is clearly excited, but as any hero and inventor would be, he's a little bit hesitant and tries to play modest in insisting that Tony does not need to do that. Tony points out, however, that the old suit is literally just cloth, and that the new suit is fully loaded with all the modern hero's needs, like fire, EMS, and police scanners, audio and visual enhancements, air filtration systems for unwanted foreign toxins. Hell, the damn thing's bulletproof. Well, small caliber anyway. But of course, in his excitement, Peter starts asking about all these possible features, and Tony basically says, that they're not included, or that he's not quite ready for things like rocket boots and heat vision and stuff like that. Now, another really interesting thing that they discuss in this issue is something that happened during a previous event called The Other, which was really kind of rad, and it had Peter being essentially reborn in a spiderweb cocoon with this voice speaking to him, and I just really liked that concept. But anyway, during that, Mary Jane had broken her arm, and Peter was off-put when she seemed to have healed in a matter of minutes. But Tony explains that he has broken so many bones in his time as Iron Man that he's developed a treatment that involves using a cold silicone injection around the bone and a flesh tone silicone outside of the arm to basically prevent swelling, and that it's better than cast and it looks non-existent. And now, as cool as that is to me, it's frustrating that he hasn't made this simple procedure available to hospitals in modern society. I mean, come on, Tony. I know you're a futurist, but be a humanitarian for 1 minute. But I digress. Peter's given the chance to test out his new suit on a couple of assholes with a hostage who have opened fire all over the highway. Just a real couple of class acts. And this gives us our first look at what will be referred to later as the Iron Spider suit. And it's sick! Standing proudly on a rooftop in broad daylight, that dark red and shining gold trim really makes this suit look like some kind of issue of What If. Like, what if Peter Parker was Iron Man? We hear Tony tell Pete to try out the mesh web gliding feature. Now, in my opinion, this is, again, a massive leap of faith. This is a trust fall between Peter and Tony. And when Peter jumps, Tony knows that he has Peter's trust. And when those rocket glider boots kick in for a moment and he doesn't splat all over the road, Peter knows that he can trust Tony. This is a very important act for what's to come. So after we see Spider-Man use those boot gliders that were supposedly not installed, we see him use heat vision that was also supposedly not installed. Then the police surveillance comms tell us that there's a blockade that's been set up in the next exit. So Spidey takes the wheel by shooting some webbing down into the car and attaching it to the steering wheel. Spider-Man is able to control the car like some kind of chariot and get the car off the freeway. So it looks like everything's fine and that the hostage is safe and that the cops have the crooks on the ground, but one of the assholes grabs a gun and fires it right at the hostage. but in an instant, Spider-Man's reflexes pull him around to take the bullet for her. Now keep in mind that this is not part of Peter's abilities. He is not bulletproof. So it's a real testament to Peter's agility and his reflexes, just how quickly he is able to make the choice to jump in front of a bullet, new suit or not. And in that one test run, we really get to see most of the Iron Spider suit's features in action. Afterwards, Peter and Mary Jane are having dinner with Tony, who finally reveals his true intentions as to why he has given Peter a job. He's taking care of Mary Jane, he's taking care of Aunt May, and it's because he believes that in Peter he has found a kindred spirit, that they have a similar goal in life, and that they see the world in the same way, that they speak the same language of common sense and morality. He really lays it on thick here. And he tells Peter that there's a difficult time ahead. He hopes to avoid it, but if they cannot, that things are going to get rough. How he needs someone that he can trust to stand by his side. He tells him that he wants to make Peter his protege, his second, that he wants Peter to shadow him and to stay by him at all times throughout whatever it is that they're about to do, and to back him up no matter what. And as Peter points out, they're essentially like taking this blood oath together, right? He's swearing him to secrecy, from everybody. He swears him to secrecy from Steve Rogers, from everybody. And that's before he even tells Peter why it is or what it is they're agreeing to or anything about it. He just demands that Peter trust him implicitly. From the beginning, no questions asked. Peter consults Mary Jane, and he agrees to Tony's terms. And Tony tells him to pack a bag and then hands him a letter that they received from Congress and that they're going to Washington, D.C. Sneaking in between Amazing Spider-Man 529 and 530 is a super neat one-shot called The New Avengers Illuminati. And oh man, I am geeking out about this one. I really love this book. As we crack the spine, I just want to note that the artwork and how it changes over the course of the different eras of each meeting that takes place is very cool. So let's get going. Many years ago, the Black Panther hosts a secret meeting of ambassadors of each of the highest superhuman authorities in the world. In addition to King T'Challa, we get Iron Man of the Avengers, Doctor Strange, Sorcerer Supreme, representing the mystic arts. We get Professor Xavier of the X-Men, representing the mutants. And then Dr. Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. We also get Black Bolt, King of the Inhumans, and Namor, King of Atlantis. It's an all-star cast. And if that is not an impressive lineup to you, then I really don't know what's going to be. Man, I really like the art of Iron Man's suit right here. This classic design with the rivets and everything. It's really nice. And as we get into the reason for the meeting, Iron Man tells us when this meeting is set by discussing the Skrull War that they had just went through and how that entire situation was their fault. This, of course, ruffles some feathers in the room, but he goes on to explain how the information that could have prevented the Kree-Skrull War was known, but it was known in fragments by the different coalitions and factions on Earth. He goes on to say that had they just had band together, had the lines of communication been clearer and trust amongst themselves been better, that this deception from the outside never could have happened. And I think it's clear to note here, I think that there's a common misconception of the Avengers and that there's some like the Justice League or something where they have like this big space station that's completely backed by the governments, or at least, the governments understand that they can't really stop it, with hundreds and hundreds of members, different shapes and sizes and races from all over the galaxy, all over from many different worlds that come together to protect the planet Earth, right? It's not like that. The EMU does have things like S.H.I.E.L.D., a ground branch. They do have S.W.O.R.D., a space branch with the Damocles base, which was once originally Kingship. But these are like military branches, and the Avengers are not. They are fully funded by Tony Stark, and the Fantastic Four are backed and funded by Reed Richards. Xavier's rich, and he supports the mutants and the X-Men. So they have their own private benefactors who operate privately thus far. vetting out who they want and only allowing in certain members, and so that they build their own internal trust systems, right? And that really becomes the focus of the conversation from here on out, the lack of trust among the super communities. Namor says that he trusts those in the room, but not their teammates or their families. They eventually go on to take a vote to meet in private in order to discuss the world's security. It is a 6 in favor, 1 opposed vote. King T'Challa refuses. He stands and tells them to walk away, abandon this line of thinking now, that the reason that they were so easily divided was because of their lack of trust to begin with. Not even family or closest friends? And how could they decide that they are the only few who get to decide the fate of the entire world without counsel, without any input from anyone else? And furthermore, what happens when one of them disagrees with the other? Are they just going to start having secret meetings within secret factions within the secret group? It would be disastrous. So with that, the Black Panther turns his back and walks away. He leaves the others behind. The others ignore his warning and agree to meet again. And in order to keep the faith that none of them have been compromised or have any plans or plots against them, they agree to let Xavier read their minds to make sure. Now, this is disheartening as well. And even Charles tries to protest, but he ultimately agrees, and they all agree as well. Now, we cut forward in time to a month prior to present day. The Hulk goes on a rampage through Las Vegas, and Maria Hill approaches Tony with a demand to do something about it. So he calls a meeting of the Illuminati to discuss his plan, and it doesn't go so well. Namor accuses them of being selfish and terrible allies, and how they have used the Hulk and never actually offered to help him. And the same thing with the Thing. And Reed Richards takes major offense to this, and he explains how they have each tried to help Banner, even Doctor Strange and Xavier, who even once looked into Bruce's mind and found out that if he could actually die from it, that he would have done himself in a long time ago. Let's just put it that way. So basically the plan is to send Hulk to an uninhabited planet where he can just have free reign to do anything that he pleases without hurting anyone else ever again. And that deep down, Banner would really want this too. Namor again threatens to fight them over it and actually comes to blows with Stark. Doctor Strange has to step in to separate them both, and eventually Namor leaves, warning that the Black Panther was right. And now we are down to 5 from the original 7 Illuminati members. And those 5 we see going ahead with the plan to trick Banner onto a rocket and blast him into space. By the final meeting, we see Tony waiting alone. He assumes the rest are not coming, but they finally appear. Richards, Black Bolt, Doctor Strange, and even Namor joining them. Like myself, Reed is kind of shocked to see Namor there after the last time, but Tony just tells them that they were all invited because it specifically impacts everybody, that they are there to discuss the upcoming Superhero Registration Act. I also want to say that it's often referred to both as the Superhuman Registration Act and the Superhero Registration Act. In the artwork, it's depicted both ways as well, so I just think it could go either way. Tony explains to them how the lack of accountability and the lack of oversight that the heroes of the Marvel Universe have operated under is coming to a close. That no matter what, this bill will be passed. He proposes getting out ahead of it. He propagates what will happen if left unchecked and describes the upcoming Civil War in vivid detail. So let's go over what Tony actually says so we can use it as a checkbox throughout the upcoming event, because it's eerie how exact some of his prediction can be. So he talks about how most likely a younger hero, somebody from like the Runaways or something like that, a young Avenger, is probably going to get carried away. They're going to have the best of intentions, but they're going to do something wrong. That they're going to try and save somebody and be heroic, but most likely they're going to make a mistake. It'll be a simple mistake, going left instead of right, up instead of down, whatever, but somebody's going to be hurt or killed because of it. And that in today's modern society, it'll most likely be recorded, and that it's going to play on every TV over and over and over, and that the entire world is going to see this event. And the unrest that's already bubbling over is going to boil over. and how every politician who's looking to make a name for themselves is going to start talking about superhero reform. How Superhero Registration Act is going to become like the media circus, and it's going to rile the people up even more against superheroes and the accountability that needs to be had. And the only thing that they can do is to try and get out in front of this. He talks about how half of them are going to go along with it and half of them probably won't. And because of that mini little rebellion, the lawmakers are probably going to try and make an example out of somebody. They're going to come down hard on some innocent, unsuspecting hero. And he actually names Spider-Man. He says, like our friend Spider-Man, somebody that they can unmask on TV and make a spectacle of, somebody with a marriage and a family on the line. To me, this is a very specific example that he uses here, but let's continue. He talks about how the country's going to rupture and sides are going to be taken and people will get hurt, that friends are going to fight friends and, former adversaries are going to team up against or with each other over common causes, and that people will die, and that is what's going to happen. And that the only thing that they can do, again, is to try and incorporate themselves into the process so that they can try and diffuse it as best as possible. Which just aggravates Namor, because in his mind, this is an I told you so kind of attitude coming from Tony, who tried to set up this clearer line of communication much earlier to prevent this exact thing from happening. He tells him that this is a surface level issue and is not any of his concern. And then he states clearly that any attempts by the surface to harm or register any of his people would result in war. And then he exits. Back at the table, Doctor Strange is deeply troubled by this bill. With his head hanging low, he simply states that it's wrong. He expresses his moral concerns over registration and caving to the fear of mob mentality. He turns to Reed Richards to back him up, but no. Reed agrees with Tony. With that, Doctor Strange realizes that he is alone in his thinking, and that much like Black Panther had warned, there will be no convincing the others any different. He tells them never to seek him out again, and then vanishes. Black Bolt relates his feelings to the remaining two members with vague hand gestures before leaving. I'm not actually sure if he's saying that he's with Iron Man or out to get him. Like, it's kind of unclear for now. So we'll figure that out later. But lastly, and this is a major moment for me, this is really what makes the entire book. Reed tells Tony that he's headed home to talk to Sue and probably fight about the Registration Act with her for the rest of his life. But before he leaves, he turns to Tony and he says, well, it was fun while it lasted. And the final page in this story is so striking to me because it shows us Tony sitting alone, head hanging low, replying to Reed probably after Reed's left. And he just says so solemnly, it really was. Let's sit with that for a second. It was fun while it lasted. Yeah, it really was. Damn, that hits so hard. And it's moments like that where if you truly understand the context, that a good book can bring you to tears. And in a comic book with the combination of visual imagery and narration, it's just, oh man, it really pulls at your heartstrings, man. Now, something you need to understand is that this exchange between these two veterans of the MU illustrates a true end of an era, okay? That everything that's happened up to this point, all of the campy stories, all the silly costumes, all the excitement and heroism, the glitz and glamour of the golden and silver age of comics were long, long gone. Even the Bronze Age is starting to tarnish at this point. We are left in this modern age, where it's time for us to have to pay for the sins of this greater past generation, in so many words. So what did I mean by that? That the Bronze Age is tarnishing and that we're now left in this modern age of comics. I have a longer video coming that takes a look at comic book eras, but most commonly, they will say that the modern age started in 1985. And I disagree with that. You see, in my opinion, the modern age of comics began in 2004 with DC's Green Lantern Rebirth by Jeff Johns, then 2005's Infinite Crisis, and then Marvel's Civil War event in 2006, solidifying the new era. Next, we head back to Amazing Spider-Man issue 530. As we pick up with Peter and Tony, we discover that the final meeting of the new Avengers Illuminati happened at midnight just last night. It's made clear here that Tony is firing on all cylinders. He's up all night pleading his case for the act to some of the biggest supers in the world, and then heads right to Congress to plead a case against the act. It's an interesting look into the way that Stark works. On the plane to Washington, Tony and Peter discuss the Superhuman Registration Act. Peter is shocked that the government is even attempting to pass it, but Tony assures Pete that not only is it going to pass, but that he agrees with it, just not in its current form. He believes in proposing some kind of reform to stave off this particular version of the legislation. Once they land and get a moment in the hotel before the congressional hearing starts, Peter tests out the 2.0 version of his Iron Spider suit, its camouflage abilities, and also those iconic Waldos. We then pick up at the hearing. Tony dances around the senator's questions, proving his familiarity in the courtroom. But lastly, he has nothing new to say, or more wisely, chooses not to. But then Peter just has to raise his hand, right? He asks for permission to speak. You can tell that Tony is nervous, but does not really do anything to stop him. Peter tries to explain to these politicians that for the most part, unlike firefighters, police officers, EMT, or military personnel, these powered individuals did not ask for this. They did not want their abilities. Now, that's not always the case, but by and large, a lot of these people are just the results of accidents. Because they are good, moral people, they understood that with great power comes great responsibility. He goes on to explain how most of the good guys are husbands and wives, mothers and fathers, and that they have loved ones that could be put into harm's way if anyone were to find out about their identities, how supervillains are bad all the time, and how good guys are just responding to emergencies. But somehow the senator twists Peter's words into a rather solid argument for the Registration Act. Defeated, Peter just kind of keeps his mouth shut for the rest of the hearing. Tony adds an analogy about prohibition and how it made criminals out of everyday citizens, how perfectly law-abiding individuals found themselves on the wrong side of the law because the government moved the line. This exchange ends when the senator asks Tony if the bill is passed, what side would Stark find himself on? And Tony tells him he has always and will always serve his country. Just after the meeting ends, on the steps of what I believe is the Capitol building, Tony and Peter are attacked by the Titanium Man, and Peter jumps into his Iron Spider suit and takes on the baddie. And that's where it leaves us. But before we get a chance to figure out what's going on here, we cut over to the Fantastic Four for a few issues. And I am very excited to see the first family in action. Civil War came out in 2006. I had just turned 16. Gotten my license and had my first job. It was the first time that I had the freedom to go to the comic shop at my own leisure and buy comics regularly. And what a fantastic time and place to start. The Civil War books stood out. They all had that matching event banner, and I read as many as I could get my hands on. I distinctly remember walking in that first time and seeing this next issue. Wow, you gotta love major crossover events, because for part 4 of the Road to Civil War, we go from Amazing Spider-Man to Fantastic Four issue 536. And what do we see on the cover? The Hammer of Thor. God, I love crossover events so much. Let's crack the spine and see what's going on. A prologue shows us an object entering Earth's atmosphere 6 months prior to present day. Present day being the early hours of the night of the famed Illuminati meeting. Reed is trying to be quiet and catch a snack, but Sue wants to know what was so important that Reed had to meet so late. He's trying to dodge her questions, which only makes her want to know even more. And I love the way that she blocks his sandwich with her force field abilities. It's fun family humor, but it's also a demonstration of the mastery that she has over her powers at this point. And that goes for all of them, honestly. Now he gets her caught up to speed, and as expected, she is also in disbelief that the government would even try. But before they can even start to debate it or have any sort of conversation about it, they're contacted by S.H.I.E.L.D. on an emergency line where they're asked to rush to Oklahoma. And in Oklahoma, we see that a military installation is being attacked by an army of Doombots. The Fantastic Four come swooping in on the Fantastic Car Mark II, and I love that this is in here because as we talked about at the end of the Illuminati issue, this will mark the end of an era. So to have things like the Fantastic Car making an appearance really drives home that this is still the Fantastic Four Volume 1, that these are the same comics that have been running since 1961, and that the Fantastic Car, which first appeared in Fantastic Four issue 3, is still around 530 some odd issues later. I mean, that's just awesome. But back to the Doombots. So at this time in the Marvel Universe, Doctor Doom is considered to be dead or dealt with, and so the Doombots would have fallen under the control of the Latvian government. Now we're given a prime example as to how the Fantastic Four operates, as we see the first line of defense being the Thing and the Human Torch just start ripping through Doombots, just left and right. Mr. Fantastic protects a group of soldiers while making contact with the head officer on site, while the Invisible Woman protects the asset. It's a highly effective team. We get to see some of the great banter between Ben Grimm, the Thing, and Johnny Storm, the Human Torch. All of a sudden, a flippin' missile is launched right into the military lab. The first family is able to protect many of the soldiers. Afterwards, they assess the extent of the damage. The building is completely gone. Only a crater remains. They assume that everything was destroyed, but that's when one of the Doombots steps up and speaks to Reed Richards. Reed instantly recognizes that this is no bot and this is the real Doom who has returned. And to make matters worse, the item that he is after that fell from the sky 6 months earlier is none other than Mjolnir, the hammer of Thor. We continue with the Fantastic Four. We learn that Victor Von Doom has returned and seems to think that he has some kind of claim to the hammer of Thor. Let's crack the spine and find out why he feels so. Distraught over seeing Doom standing before him, Reed swears it isn't possible. They had left him behind in hell with no way out. Now I believe that they're referring to the actual hell dimension of the Marvel universe that houses people like Mephisto. So we cut away to see exactly what happened to Doom. We see him standing in a fiery reddish-orange landscape surrounded by small demons and thralls from hell. He recalls for us how he refused to give up and took on a horde of demons head-on, ripping through them and holding his own until the very fabric of the dimension starts to rip apart above his head. Now, this isn't as a result of anything that Doom is doing. Instead, we see that as the portal is opening, the gods of Asgard on the other side engaged in an epic battle, Ragnarok. The editors tell us to check out Thor issue 80 through 85. Now, for anybody who's not too familiar, editor's notes will pop up like this every once in a while to let you know or clue you in on a story that you might have missed and where you can find it. And then Doom tells us that the very force and ferocity of this battle is echoing across all of creation. And then we see something rip through the dimensional plane and out the other side. So Doom risks it all and jumps headfirst into the rift. As he's traveling through this crazy light tube wormhole, he sees it, the hammer of Thor. Doom reaches out for it, and as he's falling, as he's struggling to get closer and closer to the hammer, it's harder and harder. The light particles start to resist him until he is repelled out of the beam of light and plummets onto Earth. Then he returns to Latveria to discover his prime minister talking trash about him. So he does what Doom does, or Doom what Doom do, doom to do do, doom to do do, doom to doom doom, doom to doom doom. Yeah. Anyway, he just casually kills the guy before going to take a bath. Back to present day Oklahoma, Doom tells Reed that it's a long story and that he's pretty much not going to tell him, that whole bit was just for us, the reader, and essentially to just get out of his way. And then he goes to retrieve the hammer, thinking that since it appeared to him in a time of need, that perhaps it was calling to him. Reed slingshots Ben Grimm to the center of the crater between Doom and the hammer. And with an added little bit of humor, the Thing replaces his famous catchphrase, "It's clobberin' time," with "It's hammer time." I really love the banter of these old, classic heroes like the Fantastic Four, SpiderMan, even the X-Men has great banter. The best part of any Wolverine book, in my opinion, is the inner monologue, which we will get the pleasure of seeing over the course of this event. It appears that Ben is unable to stop Dr. Doom, who's always appearing with new tricks and abilities. And after blinding Grimm, Doom makes his way to his goal. We see him reach out to take hold of Mjolnir. This next page is a massive beam of energy that's being blasted into the sky out of the center of the crater. It looks like he's done it. It looks like perhaps Victor Von Doom has obtained the power of Thor, and the first family takes a head count. As the smoke clears, all eyes are on the center. And no, Doom has not obtained the power of Thor. Doom is not worthy. It hadn't called to him. He was just in the wrong place at the right time. But as a true narcissist, Doom instantly abandons and degrades the hammer, claiming he doesn't need it and to let it become Thor's tombstone. After his departure, the Fantastic Four gather themselves and ponder the implications, all but the Thing, Ben Grimm, who's still in the crater, giving the hammer a tug. And like he says, wouldn't you? I mean, if you had the chance to try it, it's not like it's gonna hurt anything. The last page or two follows a blonde man in a fedora and a long coat buying a ticket to Oklahoma, and Grimm stating that after all, the hammer is here on Earth. It has to belong to somebody. Okay, here we are, the end to the road to the Civil War, which both started and ends with Peter Parker's trip to Washington, D.C. And as interesting as it is, this is a small issue with relatively big topics, a lot of symbolism and imagery in this one, along with some plot twists. So let's crack that spine. Remember that in Amazing Spider-Man issue 530, Peter was in the middle of fighting the Titanium Man. The entire time this battle is going on, Spider-Man is very conscious about the monuments and the historical buildings around, so he leads the fight from the Capitol building only to end up at the Lincoln Memorial. And Peter takes a second, while looking for the Titanium Man, to marvel at the Lincoln statue. And I know this comparison's made before, but just wanted to point out the size of Spider-Man, this superhuman superhero, who doesn't even come close to the feet of the statue. And comic books love to kind of point out real heroes, everyday people, and how ordinary individuals can impact the world, and that you don't have to have superpowers to do good things. Also, that the road to Civil War has led us to this particular monument and this particular speech at Gettysburg. Then knocking us back into the fray, the Titanium Man smashes into Spider-Man, but they're able to avoid any damage to the monument. We learn that the Titanium Man is a Russian mercenary who was hired to kill Tony Stark in the hopes that it would leave no one else left to prevent the government from passing the bill and hunting down and imprisoning heroes, leaving the country defenseless and prime for outside attacks. Spider-Man is able to fight him off using the Waldos to break his face shield and destroy his vision controls. Ultimately, the Titanium Man rocket boots away and Peter is super bummed that he can't follow him. Back at the Capitol, Tony continues his meeting, showing the senators the cam footage from Spider-Man's fight with the Titanium Man, and using that to prove his point, that without the supers, the country would be left defenseless and they would be vulnerable, and to shelve this idea. And it seems that it may have convinced them when Spider-Man slips down from the ceiling to address the council. He explains how a lot of heroes are out there doing dirty jobs, low-level stuff that the police don't bother with, or stuff that they can't handle, or stuff that they don't have time to handle, or the things that their higher-ups won't allow them to do. And his point is, once that they register, they no longer can do that. They no longer can help the people that need help. They have to help who they're told to help. This is a really moving speech, and it would have worked. However, one senator who's been fighting to pass the act asked Spider-Man if he's willing to come down off the ceiling, take off his mask, and say that all again under oath, which of course he isn't, and so they strike his words off the record. On the walk back, Pete and Tony take a stroll past the Lincoln Memorial, and Tony tells Peter that what he did was a good thing, that republics die when people quit voicing their concern, that when the people stop expressing to the elected officials what their interests are, the only thing left that the elected officials have to listen to are the lobbyists who are paid to stand there and talk to them all day. So ultimately what he did is a good thing. Whether or not it fell on deaf ears is an entirely different subject, but what he did was good. It was noble. Peter tries to bring up something odd that he noticed about the fight with Titanium Man, but Tony changes the subject to Lincoln. How he knew that divided, we would not be able to stand against the greater external threats that had yet to come. That even though it was brother fighting brother, and that it was bloody and horrible, that it was necessary to reunite the nation. Because in the end, the Republic held, and that we were stronger for it. So keep in mind that as far as Peter knows right now, they are on the same side of history as the likes of Lincoln. That they are fighting for the rights and the liberties and the freedoms of the massed community, and trying to keep them safe. But again, Peter can't help but go back to this original observation about how convenient it was that the Titanium Man showed up and targeted the right guy, just so happened to be caught on tape and then shown to the senators. And what he's alluding to is the idea that maybe Tony might have set the thing up or had something to do with it. And if he did, would he tell Peter? And Tony says, of course, that he did not, and that he would, of course, tell Peter if he had anything to do with it. But of course, the very next page is Tony meeting to pay the Titanium Man for his part in it all. This really shows you the beginning of the lengths that Tony Stark is willing to go to for the things that he thinks is best for the future. He lied to Peter. He lied to his country. He lied to the Illuminati, to Banner. He's not off to a great start here. But that's okay, because he was successful in preventing the act from being passed, so it was all worth it in the end. And the ends justified the means, or at least they do for him. At the tail end of the comic, we see Peter waiting for Mary Jane to finish her shower. He flips on the TV to hear a news anchor describing some horrible incident that happened in Stamford, Connecticut, and asking the question, who or what is Speedball? Well, there we have it, folks. The road to Civil War. Some of the major takeaways from this that I think are going to be really important to remember going forward are the lengths that Iron Man is willing to go to, that he has started to build a close relationship with Peter, that effectively they have shipped Hulk off planet for this event, that Thor is dead and that this is happening post Ragnarok, and lastly, that tensions are so high right now that any little mishap could lead to the enactment of registration. And we will talk more about registration and just how polarizing that is in the next branch of this event. Now, I would love to hear what your favorite moment was on the road to Civil War. What had you the most hyped? And of course, what are your current feelings on the idea of registering superheroes? Where do you stand on the Superhero Registration Act? So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay in my heart, you beautiful, beautiful person, you. So thank you to those that have just started down the road to Civil War. I hope you enjoy the journey. Those of you that have been down this road before, I love you. I appreciate you. Your continued support makes this work. I have a lot of things planned, so stick around. Until next time, enjoy yourselves.
Could you take that out?
No.